Listen up. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the podcast participants, and not to any participant's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. You know, for fun. So lighten up and enjoy. Oh my Lord. Hello everyone. You are listening to the Soft Serve podcast, and I am your host, Sawtooth Frank. On this week's episode, we're going to talk just a little bit about the ongoing war with Iran. I'm going to tell you about what I did for my birthday week/weekend. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about a movie that I saw this past weekend. A movie called The Bride. Okay, so we'll jump into all of that right after the intro music.
The Soft Serve Podcast.
You're a loser, a scumbag, lower than scum. You are a absolute zero. Lower than scum. A scumbag.
Absolute zero. Oh yeah, you're an absolute zero, baby. Yeah.
Lower than scum.
That's right.
A scumbag.
A scumbag.
Absolute zero.
Absolute zero. Oh yeah. Man, I still think I missed my calling as a music producer.
Absolute zero.
Yeah, I wrote that beat. I produced that beat. Yeah. Now I'm talking over that beat in a slightly rhythmic way. Yeah, you could say I'm talking over the beat to the beat, baby. Well, here we are on another episode of the Soft Serve podcast. Once again, I am your host, Sawtooth Frank. And we got a little couple of things to talk about this week. You know, last week I jumped in hot to the topic of the war with Iran and explained to you why it is illegal and unjustified, and the various ways that it violates Donald Trump's campaign promises not to start new wars.
Fake news.
So, you know, since our country is at war now, despite Republicans trying to rhetorically square dance their way around saying whether or not we actually are in war, right? You listen to these people, they sound like total fucking idiots, claiming that Iran is at war with us, we're not at war with Iran, that airstrikes don't constitute war with another country, right? We haven't declared war.
Come on, man.
Yada, yada, yada. Right, and I went in last week to all of the reasons why President Trump not going to Congress to get a declaration of war was wrong, right? So it's sort of ironic that you have Republicans and maggots running around out there crying we can't possibly be at war because Congress hasn't declared war. Well, how is Congress supposed to declare war if the president won't do what he's supposed to do in terms of engaging Congress to declare war? Right? It's a maddening rhetorical logic loop that turns back on itself. Anyways, I went over all of that during the previous episode of the Soft Serve podcast, and this week, I think, I in this week and subsequent weeks, I probably will do a very short segment on the war with Iran as long as it goes on. And so I think it's worth saying now as we enter the second week of this war with Iran that the war continues to hurt our country. Donald Trump's war of choice with Iran continues to damage our nation and hurt our service members. So I'm recording this on Monday, and as reported by CNN, I will say Monday, March 9th it is. I had to check my calendar. I can't keep track of the days. But as of Monday, March 9th, CNN is reporting that 7 U.S. service members are now dead as a result of the war with Iran. And I think even more disturbingly, right, is that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is promising that more U.S. service members will die.
Every once in a while, you might have one, unfortunately, we call it a squirter that makes its way through.
As reported to us from the good folks over at The Hill website, I want to give a quick plug for them. That's a place where I get a lot of my political news, The Hill. As reported by The Hill, Pete Hegseth said in a 60 Minutes interview, quote, "There will be more casualties. The president's been right to say there will be casualties. Things like this don't happen without casualties." End quote. Things like this? Do you mean, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, that the war of choice that violates Trump's campaign promises to avoid new foreign wars? Is that what you mean by things like this? War?
Every once in a while, you might have one, unfortunately, we call it a squirter that makes its way through.
Anyways, good old Hegseth is out there now, promising and preparing us that more U.S. service members are going to die for Donald Trump's choice war with Iran. And I do think it's worth pointing out once again that Donald Trump, by starting this war with Iran, is violating his own campaign promises. Right? So in the lead up to the 2024 election, Donald Trump was very clear. He promised to avoid new foreign wars. Right? And he argued frequently that prior presidents dragged the U.S. into endless wars in the Middle East. Right? And here we are. Donald Trump has dragged us into what will probably be another endless war in the Middle East.
It's all fake news.
Right? And let's be clear. Despite the claims of the administration, the United States initiated combat operations against Iran, right? And we're already seeing that this conflict, just 2 weeks in, is expanding regionally, and the administration is telling us that there is no projected end date to this war with Iran. And it's my opinion that this is going to become a long-term conflict, right? Trump also promised during his campaign that he was going to put, quote, America first, end quote, and focus on domestic priorities, right? And obviously launching a war against Iran, right, does not put America first, nor does it focus on domestic priorities, right? It diverts economic and material resources that could be spent domestically to military operations abroad. It's increasing federal spending on this war, right? And it's increasing to higher energy prices at home, right? Here in the United States. And I'll talk a little bit more about how this war is going to impact cost of living in the United States, right? Trump campaigned and claimed he was against regime change wars. Well, this turns out to be a regime change war, right? They targeted and killed Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini. And as of the recording of this podcast, Iran has just elected, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but just named Ayatollah Khomeini's son as the new supreme leader, right? And the United States, I believe they have said that they intend to go after and eliminate the Ayatollah Khomeini's son, the new supreme leader, right? So again, this is an ongoing regime change war. And as reported by CNN and other news agencies, Donald Trump has insisted that he has to have say in who Iran selects as a new leader. That sure as hell sounds like a regime change war to me.
Wrong.
Trump also, when he campaigned, said he preferred negotiating with adversaries like Iran. Right? And I see it as a violation of his campaign promises that while in the middle of negotiations with Iran, he attacked their country, started a war, and killed their leader.
Come on, man.
Right? Trump also was running around during the 2024 election campaign season claiming that he would end wars, not start them, right? We've already talked about this endlessly. Trump just started a war with Iran, possibly a new world war, right? So absolutely violating his campaign promise to end wars and not start them, right? So, and as I said, Trump promised to address affordability here when he was campaigning for a third time for president, right? And needless to say, if you have a set of eyes and ears and are paying attention, it's easy to see how this war with Iran is making affordability and cost of living worse for United States citizens. Right? So just 2 weeks in, we are already seeing rising gasoline prices for U.S. consumers. Right? And the most immediate impact here has been, we've seen the national average gas price rise from about $2.90 to $3.40 per gallon. And this is just within, a week to 2 weeks of the war starting. I believe that, within a couple of weeks to months, we're going to be back to $5 a gallon gasoline. So, this is really, really bad. And what kind of response do we get from the administration on this? From Donald Trump and his maggot henchmen? His maggot hench people? They say that increased energy prices are a small price to pay for the war. I want you to sit with that for a minute. They're acknowledging that gas prices are spiking, and they're telling you to suck it up and eat it, that it's worth it. I think that is just absolutely outrageous. What else? How else is this war with Iran going to increase our cost of living here and impact affordability in the United States? Well, obviously, it's going to cause an increase in federal military spending, right? Just in the first 100 hours of this war with Iran, the United States spent about $3.7 billion, right? And the Pentagon estimates that for every day that this war goes on, while there are combat operations, that the United States is going to have to spend $1 billion per day, right? And it's very likely that the administration is going to have to request supplemental money to wage this war, because the federal defense spending bill that they're operating off of now will not cover it, right? And that's our money, folks. Okay? And they have to borrow that money because we don't fucking have it, right? And borrowing that money is going to put increased pressure on the federal deficit and the national debt, right? So what does that mean? Right? It's going to be more borrowing by the U.S. Treasury. It's going to mean a huge federal deficit for FY 2026, right? And if this war lasts months, which it's going to, or possibly years, right? The costs of this to the American people are going to reach hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. Okay? The Iraq war cost $2 trillion. The Afghanistan war, approximately $2.3 trillion. Right? And so, what does this increased war spending and borrowing to pay for it result in? Right? It results in increased inflation risks to the U.S. economy, right? We were just starting to come out of the inflation caused by the pandemic, right? So, increased spending for the war, increased borrowing, increased energy and oil prices, right, are likely to add at least a percentage point to U.S. inflation over the next couple of quarters, right? And higher oil prices translate to, obviously, higher gasoline prices, increased air travel costs, increased food distribution costs, right? So when you go to fucking Stop and Shop or Market Basket, right? Or Big Y or Kroger or Price Chopper or wherever the fuck you get your food from, right? You're going to pay more for food again. Manufacturing costs are going to go up, right? Because oil is involved in the production of lots of manufacturing processes, right? You have to, use energy to run machines that make things. Packaging is made out of oil products often, right? Plastics come from oil, right? So increased oil prices contributes to increased manufacturing costs. The price of construction materials is likely to go up, right? So, inflation had recently begun to fall. That's a good thing, right? And I attribute that actually to the lagging effects of the Biden economy, not anything Trump did.
Fake news.
Right? We already were seeing indicators that inflation was coming down while Biden was president. But, Trump has basically done the textbook play to reverse declining inflation by causing increases in oil prices through this war of choice. Right? So all of this, right, is going to mean a slowing of economic growth in the United States, right? We're already seeing weaker job reports. I think last week, the job report showed 90,000 jobs lost, right? We're seeing falling consumer confidence. We're seeing volatility in the stock market, right? So none of this is good, folks. And I think, for the average person, we're going to suffer because of this war with Iran. Right now, of course, there are some industries out there who are going to benefit, right? Who are they? Big oil companies, right? And people who do business with big oil companies, and states who do business with big oil companies, right? They are just one sector of the war profiteers who are lining up with their tin cans to get as much money from the Trump administration and their war of choice with Iran. Okay, so hang on, folks. Hang on. I know I said this was going to be a short rant this week about the war with Iran. And I think I did pretty good by confining it to around 20 minutes. So there you go. I'm sorry. This means a lot to me. I am a veteran of the United States Army. Okay. I served active duty. I served overseas. I told you before, I've never served in combat. I don't want to insinuate that. I don't want to pretend that I am some kind of combat veteran. I am not. But I care very deeply about this country. I care very deeply about our service members. Okay? And I'm going to continue to speak out about this war of choice with Iran, this war that we do not need to be fighting. All right. So let's switch to happier subjects, shall we? I turned 52 years old last week. I am now 52, working on my 53rd year. It remains to be seen if I'll get there. I hope I do. Anyways, so I had a really good birthday week. Last Thursday, March 5th, my birthday, I went out to dinner. I met Stomping Jen and our kids, Ted and Space Unicorn, for dinner at a Vietnamese restaurant that I really like. And I got seafood pho. Now, I know some people pronounce the Vietnamese soup pho. That's how I usually pronounce it. But today I decided to say pho. I don't like saying pho, even though I think that is phonetically correct. Because it sounds like I'm going to say fuck, right? I got some fuck for dinner.
Hey, baby.
How nice would that be? Getting some fuck for dinner.
Hey, baby.
But no, I didn't get fuck for dinner. I got pho for dinner, right? So that was really great. It was good to be able to have dinner with the whole family. Stomping Jen, Ted, who is at college, so I don't get to see Ted every day anymore, and Space Unicorn. We all met and had dinner. It was good. So that was Thursday, March 5th. Then on Friday, March 6th, Stomping Jen and our friend, who has been on this podcast as a guest before, Shivering Jim. I don't know if you're a long-term listener, you'll remember Shivering Jim, right? We even have a song for Shivering Jim. I don't know if I have it loaded into this into the soundboard. I don't think I do, no, unfortunately. But there is a song dedicated to Shivering Jim, but I won't play it here. We went to a restaurant in Amherst, Massachusetts for dinner called the Amherst Oyster Bar, which was pretty good. Had dinner there. I don't get to eat a lot of seafood, right? Because we live in Western Massachusetts, which is about, 2.5 hours from the ocean. So I'm always nervous about getting seafood out here. But we got a bunch of oysters, a plate of oysters, which were really good. We shared those. We got some fried calamari, which I really like. It's one of my favorite foods. And it came with some kind of honey sauce, which I've never had before with calamari. And I have to say it worked really well. It was good. And then I got a blackened haddock sandwich, which was delicious. The only problem is my hands smelled like fish the rest of the night, even after washing them. I don't know. I find haddock a very pungent fish, right? So just by holding the sandwich, my hands felt fishy all night, or they smelled fishy all night. So that was one downside of eating a fish sandwich. But this was my first time eating at the Amherst Oyster Bar. And overall, I'll give it a thumbs up. I really enjoyed it. So I will say the space that the Amherst Oyster Bar occupies used to belong to a Amherst, Massachusetts restaurant that was sort of an institution out here. It was a place called Judy's, a restaurant called Judy's that generations of people went to. And it closed, I think, either just before the pandemic or during the pandemic, and never reopened. I think mostly because Judy, the woman who owned the restaurant and named it after herself, retired. And this new restaurant, the Amherst Oyster Bar, moved in. So far, so good. So after we went to the Amherst Oyster Bar, we went to go see a show at a local music venue called The Drake. The Drake. and we saw this band called Brass Against, right? Brass Against, Brass Against. And they are a band of, how do we describe it? They describe themselves, I'll read it from their website, brassagainst.com. Brass Against describes themselves as a collective group of musicians who share the goal of creating music to inspire social and personal change. The band curates songs from a variety of influences, from Tool, one of Stomping Jen's favorite bands, Rage Against the Machine, Soundgarden, Black Sabbath, Run the Jewels, as well as their own compositions in a heavy brass-filled symphony, right? And the show was amazing, I have to say. So just like their description says, Brass Against, when they took the stage, right, the first sort of thing you hear is the tuba begin to play, right? And this is a relatively small space, the performance space that the Drake occupies. And like you can feel that tuba in your chest, right? And then the band just launches into their versions of various hard rock and heavy metal songs. It was pretty fantastic, I have to say. And I suspect Stomping Jen wanted to go see this band, Brass Against, because they did, I think, 4 Tool and/or Pussifer cover songs, right? And Tool and/or Pussifer are 2 of Jen's favorite bands, right? They are both led by Maynard James Keenan, right? He's the guy who sings for Tool and also the guy who sings for Pussifer. There were, I think, no less than 4 Tool or Pussifer songs, right? But they also played a bunch of other songs. I think they did some Alice in Chains covers. They played a bunch of Rage Against the Machine, right? And the best part was the end, where the woman who is one of the singers for the band, let me find her name here on their website, who is fantastic. Her name is Liza Colby, and I believe she said she's from Western Massachusetts. I have to give her some serious props. She was a really amazing front person. And she did, to end the show for the encore, an absolutely killer, energized version of Rage Against the Machine's song. I forget what it's called. It's the one where they go, "Fuck you, I won't do what you told me. Fuck you, I won't do what you told me." Let's Google that. I want to see what that is. Rage Against the Machine song, "Won't do what you tell me." Okay, let's see. Okay, that's called Killing in the Name, right? And it was absolutely killer cover version, right? And Liza Colby did such a great job with it. And, she gave this really inspired, passionate, I don't want to call it a speech, right? Because that can sound like I'm putting it down. That's not what I mean at all. But it was a really inspiring statement on the importance of art and music and showing up in person and protesting. And I was delighted when she gave, a "fuck ICE" chant. And took the administration to task when she was yelling, "Fuck war," right? And what better song to do it to than Rage Against the Machine's Killing in the Name of, right? Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses. Some of those that work forces are the same that burn crosses. Now you do what they told you. Now they do what you told you. Anyways, such a good song. And it really hit, right? Really hit, given all that's going on in the world right now. And it was good to be in a space full of people feeling energized, right? By music. And I don't know, I was inspired and I really enjoyed that show. So if you get a chance to go see Brass Against, I highly recommend it. And they play all over the country and all over the world. So I don't know when they're going to be back through again, but they have CDs. You can stream their shit, I think, on Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you get your music, I think. They were also selling vinyl, which was kind of interesting at the concert. Right. So definitely support this band. They're outstanding musicians, and I think they're doing good work in terms of raising awareness, right, for the anti-war and anti-fascism movements that need support in this country. Okay, so that was Brass Against on Friday night, right, of my birthday week. Then let's see, I don't think we did much on Saturday, actually. It's kind of a quiet day. And if we did do something, I am totally blanking on what that was. But on Sunday, we went to go see a movie called The Bride. You may have heard about The Bride. This is a movie that was directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, written by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and starred Jessie Buckley. She's the woman who is up for an Oscar in Hamnet right now. And I think I talked about Hamnet a few episodes ago. But Jessie Buckley, Christian Bale, and Annette Bening are also in this movie. Right. And the movie is described as being set in 1930s Chicago. And Frankenstein asks this doctor named Dr. Euphronius, to help create him a companion, a female companion, right? So Frankenstein goes to this Dr. Euphronius and says, I want to have sex, and I want you to help me create a bride. Right, so they give life to this murdered woman who becomes the bride, right, which sets off sort of this tale of romance, police chases, and also sparks a social movement, right, in this universe that the movie takes place in. So Stomping Jen and I went to go see this movie, and I have to say, I can only speak for myself. I did not like the movie. I want to say, first of all, I'm a big supporter of movies. Number one, I hate saying I didn't like a movie, right? And if you liked the movie, I'm glad for you. I want you to like the movie. but I felt differently about it. I felt generally that the movie was very chaotic and sort of unfocused, and was just trying to do too many things at once, right? I think the movie's been described as a blend of gothic horror, romance, gangster crime story, musical numbers, and social satire, right? All kind of mixed up together, but it never comes together in a cohesive way for me, right? And it suffers from I think, a constantly shifting tone, right? Where I felt like I was getting narrative whiplash from the movie. Like I didn't know how to feel sort of at any given moment. And the movie was sort of very visually busy as well, right? And I feel like combined with its narrative messiness, the whole thing just didn't work for me. And sort of another thing to say about the movie, right, is it had sort of very heavy-handed messaging, right? I think the movie, through the character of the bride and the society that the movie is depicting in 1930s Chicago and New York, is trying to say some things about feminism, right? And the control of women during that period of time. And, potentially even today, right? But I don't feel it was handled very well. And I think some of that messaging gets lost in the messy narrative, but in like certain moments it's very in your face, and again it just felt very very inconsistent and at times overly heavy-handed, right? And so it was interesting. I don't want to give any spoilers for the movie in case you want to see it. It's not doing very well at the box office. And again, I am a supporter of movies. I own stock in movie companies. So I want you to go see this movie, obviously. And go form your own opinion about it. But, I just didn't care for it in particular. It didn't come together for me as a movie. So anyways, that's all I want to say about The Bride, because I really can't get into much more without spoiling it for you. But go see it. And if you have seen it and you want to share your opinion with me about it, I would love to hear about that. Okay? And you can reach out to me on social media, or you can send me an email at softservepodcast@gmail.com. You can send me a DM, and I'll read your feedback here online on the show. Okay. What else is going on? I want to keep this episode under an hour, and I see I'm at 44 minutes already. So let's see. Stomping Jen and I finished Bridgerton season 4. I don't know if I talked about that yet. I think I might have already talked about that, which I'm sad about because I really enjoyed this season of Bridgerton. And I was feeling kind of depressed to have to leave the Bridgerton world. And then I realized there's a whole other show out there set in the Bridgerton universe called Queen Charlotte, Now, here's the crazy thing. So we started watching Queen Charlotte, and I'm almost done with it. It's only 6 episodes. I got about half an episode left. Here's the thing about Queen Charlotte. For some reason, through most of my watching experience with Bridgerton, I thought that the Bridgerton universe was set sort of like in an alternative dimension, like it was an alternative British history in some way. But I was surprised to learn last week that, it's not intended to be. It's intended to be set in the real world, and that Queen Charlotte, who appears in Bridgerton's seasons 1 to 4 and in the Queen Charlotte show, was a real queen who was married to King George III, who was colloquially known as the Mad King, right? And it turns out, I think historians and medical professionals believe was suffering most likely from bipolar disorder. But whatever the retrospective diagnosis is, it's widely understood that King George III was mentally ill. He was suffering from mental illnesses, and he had to be relieved of his regency, I think, in the last couple of years of his ruling as a monarch. And so anyways, I sort of have been fascinated more and more by Queen Charlotte as a historical figure. So as we've been going along through season 4 of Bridgerton and the Queen Charlotte show, I've been reading up on her and her experience as a queen married to King George, who was suffering from mental illness. So that's it. I just wanted to update you on those things. You can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram. You can follow us on Substack. Sometimes I publish writing there. You can contact me at softservepodcast@gmail.com. You can send me a direct message through the social media apps. And love to hear from you. And you might hear a closing door behind me. That is Stomping Jen coming into the room.
I don't want to be an immortal lobster.
But she is coming into the room, so you can hear noise behind me in the room. So, I say to you all, this week, until next week, bye now.
This world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road.